Okay, so we've been taken over by Mr. Chippie, and he's busy taking the front panel off in an attempt to get to those nasty capacitors on the preamp panel. So the difficulty now is that with this board you can't take it out and you can't get to the back of it. Now I'm sure I've seen some of these models to have cutouts in the chassis, but this one isn't the case. So what I had to do is to disconnect 3 wires so we can actually tilt it up a bit enough to solder and unsolder the components. Anyway, that's the first one done. So now that's all the capacitors changed on all the boards. Just have the big one on the power supply to do when they arrive, and Mr. C is now going to put some of it back together, and it's now far too late to carry on, and we'll carry on with it another day. Well, I can't remember where we got to with the video because that was a couple of days ago. I wanted to change that big capacitor which you can see on the left centre of the picture, and that's the main electrolytic smoothing capacitor for the power supply. It's 4,500 microfarads and I think it's 35 volts. Well, what we've done is to order 4,700 microfarads because that's the current preferred value, and we've got this strange looking squat thing because it's the right diameter, and the danger here is that if we put the equivalent in, I'll show you the equivalent. This is 4,700 at 35 volts and this is at 100 volts, and I've chosen to do that so that it fits in the P clip. So more expensive part, but at least it fits, it's not rattling around, and what I don't want to be doing is glue gunning parts in when we can put it in a P clip by selecting carefully. So that's our last part to go in. So I'll do that. Mr. C's off somewhere at the moment. So we're going to switch on. I don't know whether the pilot light's going to light. We've got replacements. This will be the first time this has been on, I would think, for quite some time. Here we go. So we've got the pilot light lit. So the first thing I need to check, I had no switch on thumb from the speakers, which I can assure you I've got connected. So we'll just make sure that we've got something across this capacitor. I'm just having a good sniff around as well. So we've got absolutely nothing there. So look at the secondary of the transformer. So we've got 24 volts on the transformer. No, we've got no DC coming out there. Okay. So we'll switch off and we'll look into what's happened with the power supply, which is here on the circuit diagram. It's got a bridge rectifier, 3 transistors doing the regulation. So I expect the pilot lamp comes straight off the AC. It does. The pilot lamp is, you've got the transformer and you've got the pilot lamp there. So we'll just check that we've got something coming out of the bridge rectifier, because that big capacitor is this side of the regulation. Now there's a fuse, and I wonder if that fuse is a secondary fuse. I can't see it in the circuit. Anyway, I'll have an investigation, we'll see what happens. Okay, so we changed the fuse. The secondary fuse there is a 2 amp fuse. I've changed that, so not sure why that was popped, but anyway it is. And we will switch on once again. And then the fuse blew, so we've got a major overload. So I've unsoldered the secondary of the transformer, I've unsoldered the power input to the main smoothing capacitor, and we've been able to detach the board, which we'd previously changed one of the only capacitor on. So what I'm now going to do, I'm getting a short circuit reading on the rectifier diodes, and the way that blew quite viciously tells me there's going to be a short on a bridge rectifier. And of course with these products you don't know whether people have tried listening to them on default condition instead of switching them off. I mean, when we had the television shop, people would watch the television with no picture and carry on listening to the sound, and then something else would burn out and you'd have that avalanche effect, but that's what people do. So this board's been out before because the wires have been cut off, so that's interesting, but probably not recently. So I'm going to get those unsoldered and we'll check them. So I've unsoldered one end just so that we don't get interference in the circuit. We'll go into diode test on our little RS meter, and if we can get to the other end, easier said than done. They're probably about 2 amps these. I'm not getting a reading there, so I'll just turn the probes round. Getting a reading there, which I'm the kind of reading I would expect. So we'll move on to the next one, which is the same way round. That kind of reads right. Now I'll change the probes around because these are the opposite polarity. Well, they actually read okay out of circuit. But we'll replace them anyway. Okay, so what we've done here is to connect it to the bench power supply. That's what the wire's twisted round are. It's 15 volts high tension. And in selecting gram, what I can do is with my finger on a screwdriver, go on one channel, that's left, go on the right channel, and that's right. So that's working fine. We can change the volume, and probably if we press the mono button we can get them both at once, which we can. So we're heading in the right direction, so our fault must lie on the power supply. Right, so we've proved it's working on an external power supply. We can't check the radio because of the radio having a higher voltage feed slightly. Mind you, the radios can be the letdown on these if they've got germanium in them. So the first diode, I'm going to replace, can't even speak, replace these anyway. The second diode, reads okay. Third diode, reads okay. And the fourth diode reads okay. So we'll put in one N4003s. I think this is about 2 amps. So we'll put in 3 amps. because that fuse didn't half blow viciously. Okay, so we've changed the rectifier diodes for 3 amp 1N5408s. We only seem to have 1N5408s. We could have 5401s for this product, but there you go, they're 1000 volts or whatever that is. So what we're not doing, we're not connecting the amplifier side of it. That's going to remain disconnected, and so the regulated supply is the bit which we're interested in, which will go to the radio tuner with it being varicap. So we know the amplifier works, and that'll pick up dirty DC, no doubt, somehow, relatively dirty, off that power supply. So we'll switch it on and watch the fuse go pop. Oh, the fuse hasn't gone pop. So we'll get the meter right in the works. Camera can't see that. Camera can see that. And let's see what the power supply is doing. It should be 15 volts. So if I can just, yeah, it's very, very close to the bottom there. In fact, that's so close to the bottom, I don't like it in that position. I've just pulled the board up a fraction because this is positive earth chassis. I'd like to see some tape across the bottom just for a bit of peace of mind. So switch back on, and we should have power between there. I've got 6.9 volts, and I don't know why I have got 6.9 volts, because I would expect 15. Okay, pause the video and think about it. So at this point we've now got the, we've gone back onto the bench power supply, and we can now work the radio.
And not just on those ecosystems, but on the health.
And we've got both channels working as we would expect. Left channel, right channel.
Keeping itself to itself. It's storing carbon that's falling down from above.
Interconnected, isn't it?
It is, it really is.
Well, the World Wildlife Fund has been pushing for a moratorium on mining deep sea metals, and recently several big companies, Google and
We'll clean those controls, but there we, there we are. We've got the bench speakers underneath the bench. So we've still got a problem on this regulator board, and whenever we reconnect this, I've checked the transistors, done the diodes, we've checked the capacitors. I think every part's going to have to come out one by one, all the resistors, and be checked. So it's a strange scenario, but at least the thing is working, and that's what's important. Perfect. Right. Oh, after all that aggro, simple as the bulb not in the holder properly. I suppose when the chassis is in the cabinet, trying to get it back on its guide rails, if it was only in one of its guide rails, and it would slip sideways. So there you go. Good. Well, I'm glad we got to the bottom of that, because it's starting to get annoying. I think we did the right thing to cut that tag off the bottom of the printed circuit board, because that was liable to disappear onto the chassis. And we want us to check the 15 volt regulated line at the, it's what the service manual calls for. We want you to check the 15 volt regulated line at the radio rather than at the power supply. So we'll check that. And it's 17.9, so that does need adjusting. Of course, there won't be any trimming tools now I'm sat down here. I'm not wrong there. I'm not usually on bench 4, don't know what there is. I'll just move across the bench 4A. Because I do receivers at bench 4A, there's a black twagger. So with it being electronic tuning, that's why the radio's power supply is regulated. So hopefully we can drop that down to 15. I think that's a bit nearer. It was probably a bit higher to overcome the rubbish capacitors that were in before. So that's it. I just need to bolt this back together. I'd even bolted the amplifier upside down just in case it wasn't getting an earth, you know. So let's just check that once again.
Last week's elections. It will become compulsory for cats to be microchipped under new government measures to improve the welfare of animals. The legislation includes a ban on the export of live animals for slaughter and the keeping of primates as pets.
Left.
BBC News. Now let's take a quick look at what's coming up in the next hour here on Radio 4. In a moment, another life-changing story.
We'll clean those potentiometers.
Whose vitiligo caused all of her brown skin to turn white. She'll be talking to Jane Garvey next. After that, the smiling philosopher, who's perhaps the most famous Chinese person in history, who advocated a path of calmness in the midst of social turmoil. Surely we could all do with a bit of Confucius, and you'll find him here at 9:45 on Radio 4 FM, while our daily service takes its place on Radio 4 Longwave as usual. So let's get started and hand over to Jane Garvey.
What are we drawing?
And introduce our guest this week.
Hi, this is Jane Garvey, and you're listening to Life Changing. Every week, I
well, that all looks normal.
Who's lived through a turning point that's made them rethink their lives.
Right, we'll get the front on it. We'll get the amplifier panel the right way around and screw it in place. Just before we put it together, this push button bank here has got an 8BA nut and bolt, and this one has got an 8BA bolt which is captive in this side, but the actual bolt is missing from the other side. So I've had a look round and I've actually managed to find an 8BA bolt, and I'm glad we've got them. Mind you, it's a slotted one and not a Phillips, but beggars can't be choosers and all that. They're quite hard to come by these days. There we are. So to conclude, I've actually taken the front off the plastic perspex to clean behind. I wouldn't normally do that, but it had got kind of dust between the two, so there's every chance. Oh, I've just glued that, haven't I? Oh, we've got no aerial whatsoever. Well, it's a bit scratchy in the middle of nowhere with a foot-long prod.
Good going. And Carol has attended Popmaster Live events in London during the Beast release. She went there, she has photographs of herself with you. I'll buy the negatives. From both events, believes you are something akin to God in human form.
I don't think I'll turn it off there. I think we'll unplug it from the Poppy device.
You need to know a serious failure on her part. Oh dear. Carol has been asked to arrange an important meeting at her work. All aspects of the day.
I love the way these switch off as the voltage drops. The Vari Cap tuner changes its frequency. And we had a 2412 when I was a boy at home. That's the one with the stereo decoder, and it's kind of something I remember well. So there we have it, the HMV Stereomaster 2411 full electronics overhaul, all working beautifully. So the next video and the final one, we've got to change the speakers on this one for the reason I told you in the first video, because 2 of them are missing. So that is something. Whoops, kicks the tripod like I do. So we're waiting for the tweeters to come from China. I've got the woofers, but to try and get something that fitted anything near the apertures we'd got, that was what we had to do. And we're going to have to move over to piezo horn tweeters and not have the crossovers. So I'm going to have to just make sure the treble isn't too great. But this is what happens when people take speakers out and lose them. So it's probably going to perform actually better than it ever did, and the quality of the capacitors we've put in far and away exceeds what was available in 1973. So I'm pleased with the result. Bit of a head scratcher with that light bulb not properly in its holder and shorting to chassis, but everything got sorted. So thanks for watching HMV Stereomaster 2411, and the part 3 will follow in a few days. I think we'll better get some CB radios done.